Okay, we're ready to start, Councillor Freebody.
Fabulous. Thank you very much, Nick. Right, good evening and welcome to those councillors attending and to the members of public listening. This is a remote meeting of Eastbourne Borough Council Scrutiny Committee. My name's Councillor Tony Freebody and I'm the chair of the Scrutiny Committee. I would like my colleague councillors to introduce themselves. And when you're introducing yourselves, can I ask that all councillors please confirm whether they need to declare an interest in any item on the agenda. I welcome Councillor Penny DeCara to the meeting as a replacement for Councillor Lamb, and I would publicly like to wish Councillor Lamb a full recovery. Who's had a quite difficult time over Christmas, but she's on the mend, which is really good news. I'd also like to welcome Chief Inspector Di Lewis from Sussex Police, who is supporting the Community Safety Partnership report. So, if I do a roll call of councillors, and then if you can introduce yourselves, and as I say, then declare an interest on any items on the agenda if you have so. So, Councillor Helen Burton.
Yes, I'm here, thank you, from representing St Anthony's Ward, and I have no interest to declare.
Fabulous, thank you, Councillor Burton. Councillor Penny DeCara.
Hello, Councillor Penny DeCara from Sovereign Ward, and I have no interest to declare.
Fantastic. Councillor Peter Diplock.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. Councillor Peter Diplock from Old Town, and I have no interest to declare.
Brilliant. Thank you, Councillor Diplock. Councillor Maxted.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. Councillor Robin Maxted, Upperton Ward, and I have no interest to declare. Thank you.
Fab. Councillor Rodahan.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Pat Rodahan from Upperton Ward, and I have got no interest to declare.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rodahan. And last but by no means least, Councillor Smart.
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, everybody. Councillor Robert Smart from Meads Ward, and I have no interest to declare.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Councillor Smart. I don't have any, I have to think for a minute of the Cecil one, but I don't have any declarations of interest in this meeting. So we'll move on. I'll ask officers who are in attendance to present reports and to respond to any questions from members. And if they can introduce themselves at the start of the reports or before speaking, that'd be really handy. Can I just thank the officers for their time as well this evening? I see many officers in the meeting, which is really good to see. And thank you for your time, because obviously a lot of your time spent on things like Microsoft Teams and Skype meetings, etc. May I ask that everyone mute their microphones when they're not speaking, please? And if you have connectivity issues, it might be helpful to turn off your camera when not speaking. If for some reason your connection dips out, then that's absolutely fine. You can come back in again. And I've already been notified of one councillor's problems with their connection. Can all councillors, officers and participants please clearly state their name each time they speak, so it's clear to the members who is speaking at the time. And can you also let us know when you finish making your contribution so that we can move on. As you know, we've got the hand icon that you can use, so if anyone wishes to speak, can you please raise the hand icon in Teams so that I can see you, and I will then ask you to speak in turn. So moving swiftly on, minutes of the previous meetings, pages 5 to 8. I will assume that these are agreed unless anyone wishes to comment on them now. And I can't see at the same time whilst looking at this. So, Councillor Maxted.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Councillor Robin Maxted. Yeah, just another a reference to your counterpart in Lewis on page 7, section 20. Might need to change this.
Got a doppelganger.
Councillor Freebody, Nick, Mechanic Services. Yes, yep. I will alter that reference, and yeah, apologies.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Maxted. Anyone else? Nope. Lovely. Okay, so declarations we've gone through. Substitutes members, we've got Councillor DeCara, which I've already mentioned. Questions from members of the public, I don't have any received. Agenda item 5, urgent items of business, there are none. Agenda item 6, the right to address the meeting. I have no requests received. So, moving swiftly on to agenda item 7, which is the Community Safety Partnership Annual Report, which is on pages 9 to 18 of your pack. This is presented by Oliver Jones and Chief Inspector Di Lewis. So welcome, Chief Inspector Lewis, and can you, Oliver, if you'd like to present your report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Oliver Jones, I'm the Strategy and Partnership Lead covering housing and community safety. This is the annual review of the Community Safety Partnerships activities. Just to point out, the scrutiny committees have a specific remit to take a closer look at the activities of the partnership each year under provisions set out in the 1998 Criminal Justice Act. We've delivered activities this year in line with the agreed business plan. And to briefly review those priorities for you, that's setting out to tackle the incidents of antisocial behaviour, hate crime, domestic and sexual abuse, also looking at serious violence and knife crime, supporting the street community here in Eastbourne and addressing related antisocial behaviour, and the 5th priority is around addressing antisocial behaviour on our roads. In addition to that, the partnership is allocated a grant each year by the Police and Crime Commissioner's Office, and that grant was £48,000 in 2020-21. The Council plays a key role in supporting the work of the partnership each year by acting as its secretariat and coordinating the agreed strategic planning and delivers activities alongside other key partners, including Sussex Police, East Sussex Fire and Rescue Service, and the county's Safer East Sussex team. And as you mentioned, Chief Inspector Lewis will be speaking in a minute and just going through some of the crime trends and issues that have risen across the year. The partnership's met regularly across the year, as has the supporting joint action group, which looks at local matters and trends in detail. We only missed one meeting in April due to the pandemic. Just having a real quick look at crime trends, Eastbourne remains a really relatively safe area to live in the country. Recorded 90 crimes per 1,000 residents in 2019-20, which, when compared with a similar group of local authorities that are put together by the Office for National Statistics, that compares to an average of 108 crimes per 1,000. Though the number of reported crimes did rise in the year to March 2020, it did fall back during lockdown and the pandemic, reflecting more limited opportunities to commit burglary and shoplifting as businesses were closed. Domestic abuse remained steady overall throughout the year, though it did rise during periods of lockdown. And one of the biggest trends we saw was a really significant increase in antisocial behaviour reports received by the police across the year. And Chief Inspector Lewis will say a little more on that. In terms of the projects that the partnership has sponsored all the year, it really is all about partnerships. Partnership is the key word. We spent some money with a local organisation called Mediation UK and provided some funding for them to accept referrals from the private rented and occupied sector to bolster the work they already do with Homes First. We supported Sussex Police during Operation Blitz, which is the local antisocial behaviour initiative. Operation Sceptre, which looks at initiatives to tackle knife crime, particularly amongst young people. And we've been actively contributing to the work of the local violence reduction unit. And we've got some focused work in Devonshire Ward that we're going to be undertaking some public consultation on soon. Other programmes have looked to support victims of domestic abuse, and we've diverted some of the funding that we had in place for a schools education programme. Obviously, schools aren't meeting, so we've put that back towards the front line to support victims with a high degree of need during the pandemic. And on the youth diversion fund, it's been a bit difficult to support schemes this year because they haven't been meeting. Though we have been approaching some local organisations over the past few weeks to try and secure funding for schemes as things open up.
Helen Burton
is now exiting.
If with that, I'll hand over to Chief Inspector Lewis, if I may. Thank you.
Hello there. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Oliver, for that. So I'm Di Lewis. I'm the District Commander for Eastbourne and Lewis. And obviously this has been, the last year has been really challenging for us all with the pandemic. And we've seen a real change in crime, trends. I'm just going to go through a few bits that we've been dealing with over the last 12 months and the issues that we've had to pick up. So I'll start. We've had a slight increase in our number of cannabis factories run by Albanians across East Sussex. They have touched on Eastbourne, and their reach is likely to be significant in terms of organised crime. We are looking at the full impact of these at the moment, and intelligence is being developed on them. Child exploitation and drugs harm, targeting young people that have crossed over from the exploited to the exploiter, and this links in with our county lines. Both Eastbourne and Hastings are the urban areas of East Sussex and are thought to have similar number of Class A users. However, the intel suggests that this time Eastbourne has around 14 different confirmed county lines. And this has been, as you know, is significant. It's one of those really areas for me that is concerning since coming in as a district commander, and I want him to do some significant work on this. And we did have, unfortunately, it was cancelled last week because our county lines intensification week that was national. There's a fortnight actually is running this week as well, but due to the second lockdown, this was cancelled. However, I did do some concerted work with my teams in the town on Friday to be disruptive in relation to our county lines, and there was some significant impact on those, which I think is really important. We need to safeguard those young children that are being exploited in relation to county lines, and we also need to look after those that are impacted by the use of drugs. So burglary, we've had some shared we shared some statistics around Eastbourne burglary with Oliver, and obviously we can do some updates on that. We've had some significant arrests in the last few weeks in relation to prolific commercial burglars, one who has been recalled to prison. We've also been running an operation which is linked to organised crime around bike thefts out of sheds, which is still linked to burglaries. And again, we've had some significant arrests around that in the last couple of weeks. And then we're looking into the bigger picture about why that is happening and what we can do to try and reduce that and minimise the risk that plays. Oliver touched on antisocial behaviour. It has been significant during the different periods of lockdown. Some of that is with our street community, and we ran an operation over Christmas which was really effective to look at our town centre presence within over that Christmas period. That's linked in with a significant number of different placements coming from Brighton and elsewhere into the town, and that did start at the very beginning of lockdown because Eastbourne provided one of the largest numbers of accommodation for those that were homeless for East Sussex. So that did have a significant impact on us, and we ran a policing operation to support that. But we're now in a position to understand how that works, the impact that has, to understand who is coming into the town and how we can best support those. Some of the premises have been used by Brighton Housing, and they need some intervention, which does impact on the demand on policing, and it has an impact on those living in the vicinity. So the different hotels are being used, and that impacts on our local communities as well as our local street communities. So that has had an impact. But we are working closely with local authorities and our partners to support this, and we're going to have that it is better under control and we understand it more. We've still seen an increase in neighbour disputes, some significant from medium to high risk cases managed by housing police and others on the HASBRAC agenda. So we've used mediation services, victim support and safe from harm. They've had a healthy take up to support those within the neighbourhood disputes. We've also seen a significant increase in antisocial driving, which some of you may well be aware of. We're linking in with our colleagues within our roads policing unit to support that, and we've done some significant policing operations to try and minimise that. It is actually now a force-wide operation, which is called Operations Downsway, which is looking at the significance around antisocial driving and also across the whole of Sussex to try and reduce those that are killed and seriously injured on our streets. So that is an ongoing operation. And currently, obviously, significant at the minute with the drop in weather and the temperature changes is the winter provisions and the RSI accommodation. Lots of work to support the efforts provided by accommodation across the town centre. Some have had some challenging clients. It's unknown territory and so needs investment up front to try and get this right, to make sure that we can provide the right support for those of our community that are living on the streets and getting that right. We've had some good support from our third tier providers and the charities. The concern obviously during the pandemic is around the COVID restrictions, but we've been managing to be able to support that. So there's just really a snapshot, whistle-stop tour of what's been going on, some really significant work happening, and we've seen an increase in our neighbourhood policing team, increase in our PCSO numbers across the force, and also increase in our supervisors to support those teams. And I think they are really starting to have an impact. As Oliver did touch on as well, the Violence Reduction Unit is doing a piece of work within Devonshire Ward, and we've got specific PCSOs allocated to that to look at violence and how we can reduce that violence within that ward. A lot of that does link in with nighttime economy, and obviously at the minute, with lockdown as we are, that is reducing significant. But we understand that obviously once we come out of lockdown, there is going to be an impact within the town. So yeah, that is my my update for you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief Inspector Lewis. I don't have any hands yet. I just wanted to ask or comment. What I'm going to do is ask. Oh, Councillor Dakara's raised a hand. What I'm going to ask councillors to do is those to ask sort of questions, and then if there are no more, then sort of either Oliver or Chief Inspector Lewis can answer those at the end, rather than we keep going back and forth all the time. So just my points on there was, yeah, the Brighton, so this for Chief Inspector Lewis, but and for Oliver. So the Brighton housing thing, at the end of this meeting, Chief Inspector Lewis, we are going to look at setting up a scrutiny panel to look at this issue with Brighton. So I sort of notify you that now, so that it would be really helpful if there was a representative of the police when we come to do that review, because I think any information we can get from all parties, we can then use that information and flag it up with ministers up in government to support this, because it is a problem, and it's people's lives at the end of the day that are being dramatically affected. And I'll say it in this meeting, what appears to be Brighton's reluctance to engage with us on this issue. So there is that to look at. Antisocial driving, I wonder if there's any key demographics to antisocial driving. We tend to blame it on younger people, but it seems a bit strange we've got a lot of antisocial driving when we're all supposed to be indoors and only travelling to and from work, which seems to be, very strange. So I wonder if you've got any information on that. And as you say, antisocial behaviour, I see the work that your colleagues have done regarding not just one premises, but there was a gym that had opened that was operated publicly. To thank you and your colleagues, Chief Inspector Lewis, because you've had to adapt to a very fast changing situation over the last year with lockdown. Some of those plans that you've put together, and I know that the Joint Action Group as well that had done a year ago, we're in a much different climate at the moment. The whole world's changed. But things like county lines, which is very concerning. And there's, I don't think people understand just the impact of county lines and some of the most vulnerable people involved with county lines. So I'm making a point here rather than asking a question. But if you've got anything on antisocial driving, key demographics, that would be helpful. If there's anything you can help with Brighton housing when we come to our scrutiny review later, that'd be helpful as well. I'm going to ask any other councillors if they've got questions now, and then come back to you in the end if that's all right. So I had Councillor Dakara's hand up was first, and then I've got Councillor Smart.
Hello, thank you, Chair. Councillor Penny Dakara. I was initially a little bit concerned that there wasn't anything in the report concerning drugs. So I was really pleased to hear Chief Inspector Lewis talking about the work that's being done on drugs and the county lines. That's it's good to hear. Regarding the antisocial behaviour and the lockdown, the impact from lockdown, are the cases particularly lockdown related, or are they across the board? And do you think there is a sense that there might be more incidents being reported because people are at home, basically, or I won't say curtain twitching, but you know what I mean. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Takara. I've got Councillor Smart and Councillor Diplock as well, so I'll go to you two next. So Councillor Smart and Councillor Diplock. Sorry, Councillor Diplock, I didn't see your hand.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Robert Smart, Meads Ward. Di, thank you very much for your presentation. I don't think we've met, actually. I speak quite a lot with Rachel Barrow.
Yeah.
But I mean, clearly, and I'm always saying to her, look, some of the issues that we get involved with are relatively low priority compared to some of the bigger stuff that you actually have to deal with. So I think we're always cognizant of that particular issue, that you're dealing with some fairly serious stuff. And there is some serious crime in Eastbourne. I don't actually like relative measures. I think the absolute level of crime in Eastbourne is too much, irrespective of how it pans out relative to other places. Some of it, of course, we've discussed the Brighton issue. You've discussed antisocial driving. I'll just nag you on one point, which Rachel is well aware of, and that is the antisocial driving on the seafront. It's not only speed, it's noise as well. And what is frustrating is that really what we need is a noise camera, or some work on that potentially, and a speed camera. And that will throw me into the financial situation where it's interesting, not nobody's fault here, but the legislation demands that we talk in terms of a budget of 48,000. But for instance, I mean, clearly that is the tip of the iceberg. And for instance, not on this agenda is the £420,000, almost 10 times, being spent currently in Devonshire Ward. And we have no sight in terms of, or scrutiny of what that's being spent on or how effectively it's being spent. I don't know if you've got any views on that. I mean, for instance, I've now extracted today an analysis of some of it, which includes BCRP membership of £51,000. I don't know what that is, for instance. I mean, but my point is that it would be interesting to have some sort of feedback, not necessarily from yourself, Di, but you may have a view in terms of the effectiveness of the spend of that £420,000, because it sounds like quite a lot of money and we should be getting some benefit out of it, I hope. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Smart. And then I'm going to go to Councillor Diplock. And then, unless there's any more hands, I'm going to let Chief Inspector Lewis reply, because there's quite a bit there. So, Councillor Diplock, and then Chief Inspector Lewis, if you'd like to reply afterwards, that's fine. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chief Inspector Lewis, for joining us. And two quick points. First is, I just want to say thank you on behalf of everyone here and the people of Eastbourne. The police do such incredible hard work, and just a heartfelt thank you for everything that's been going on, especially this last year. So thank you. My second point, rather opportunistically, you mentioned bicycle thefts from garages and sheds. I know we've been particularly plagued with that in Old Town. I don't know if you can give us just a few more brief details whether you are restricted in doing so on that particular score. Thank you very much.
Okay, Chair, are you happy for me to respond to those? I've made some notes as we've gone along.
Yeah, that's good job.
So,
yeah, I'm more than happy. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll start with, if we talk about the Brighton and the housing, Rachel Barrow, who's my district inspector, you probably all know incredibly well. She does a fantastic job in the town. She has been working closely with the local authority, with obviously Eastbourne and Brighton, to get this much better. Because I think what's been happening is those people have been placed in premises and then just left, and that has been the biggest issue. And some of the placements, they've not all been in Eastbourne, some of them been in New Haven, have been in quite vulnerable locations, and we're impacting, when we're moving people there, we're impacting on the other vulnerable people that are living in those locations. So yes, of course, we'd be happily involved in the scrutiny panel. I think that'd be really good, and Rachel's probably the best person to do that with my support, because she's had some heavy involvement in this for the last year. Obviously, the whole issue around the location of the temporary accommodation came to us completely out of the blue when this all started a year ago. So you can imagine that what we've developed and how we've gone on from that in the last 12 months has been unbelievable. So yes, some good work there, but of course can link in with that panel for you. Talking about antisocial driving, the demographics, it is a real challenge to understand. Generally it's young people. In the first period of lockdown, or as it was released slightly, it was about people meeting up, wanting to spend some time together. And so therefore they weren't in breach of lockdown, but there was other things that we were trying to do to try and prevent that. We haven't had so much recently, albeit people are still going out in their cars. We are not stopping people, as in doing road checks or roadblocks. But if we are going to stop, if we are looking at people within their cars, we are stopping them and giving them tickets now. So over the weekend, just out of interest, because it's not gone out in the press, because we don't produce it all the time, I think we did something like 17 tickets just for people in cars, 4 up together, driving down to the coast because they wanted to see the sea, coming down to derelict properties, all of these, and people are getting fixed penalties now. So that's a challenge around the driving. Linking in with one of your councillors around stuff on the seafront, yes, I do understand that, and I know that that's been significant. The noise camera it's a real it's a massive cost. In fact, there's only 2 in the country. One of those is in Knightsbridge, I think. They have been looking into some handheld devices, but again, it's just measuring the sound and noise and giving a reason to stop people. And our roads policing team are working closely with my neighbourhood teams to try and support that problem profile. But I do understand noise is a big issue for people. It's not just in Eastbourne, but it's across the whole of Sussex. So they are looking into some work with that. However hard it will be, I don't think the speed camera will certainly not for some time come into play. There's not the injuries that we see to get that speed camera up. Unfortunately, they are in those certain hotspots around the county. But that is a challenge around the speed. But we will do our best to do our operation, and we often do it with our roads policing colleagues to stop people and do that enforcement. So we will continue to do that. When you're looking at antisocial behaviour in general, the councillor who spoke about, is it people prying out of people's windows because they're bored? Potentially, yes. And some of it, and our antisocial behaviour is also where we record our malicious communications. So a lot of that may be phone calls coming in, it's malicious comms, as we call it, which is also antisocial behaviour. People are frustrated. Kids are trying to get out and about doing things. It's a really challenging time. So that's potentially where we've seen an increase. We've seen an increase in the town centre and ASB with our street community. You've probably noticed from you touched on it about one of the gyms in the town that has been flaunting the legislation for some period of time. That was a protracted investigation and operation, and I was really pleased that we were successful in enforcing that last week. And that will continue. But we did have people that were in that gym that shouldn't have been using it that were issued tickets as well. So I think that's hopefully those big county lines. Yes, as I touched on before, is a big issue. The impact of it is significant. The effect it has on our young children, not just in the town centre, but externally outside the town, our rural communities as well, is impacted. It's something that is high on my agenda, and it's something that I will keep working on continuously to support that. I understand you're talking about the Meads, the council about the Meads wards, that some of your crime is low priority. I do understand that. It might be low priority to us, but it's impactive on you and members of the community. So for me, it's impactive as well. So we need to be able to manage all of it, not just those high threat, harm and risk issues, but it is those lower level stuff that actually keeps going and keeps impacting on people. So whereas it's low priority, for us, it certainly is significant. I can't comment too much about the money spend. What I will say is our BCRP is our Business Crime Reduction Partnership, and actually that is significant for our businesses in the town, albeit a lot of them are shut at the minute. But when the town is open and busy, that's about how we can help them to reduce crime in the businesses, which impacts on everybody. So I know that's a significant amount of money, but they do contribute towards that, and actually that's a good piece of work. They link in with the with us directly, with able to report crime to us directly to the police as opposed to going through our 101. So that supports them. So a good piece of initiative there. BCRP runs across the force, and I appreciate the thank you from Councillor, and I'm sure there's a number of you appreciate the work we do. It has been really challenging in the last 12 months. Not only the fact that our officers are not being vaccinated currently, they're out there all the time, not knowing what they're dealing with or who they're going to speak to. In the last lockdown, prior to this last lockdown, we've had a significant increase in our staff that were getting impacted by COVID before the last time. So that has had a significant impact on us. Unfortunately, demand is going down slightly currently because of lockdown, so we are managing this. The bike theft that you asked about, I think we've charged 2 offenders in relation to that. We are still looking into it because we are still seeing some impact of those thefts within the town. But currently, we've been able to charge, which is significant for that, and also picked up some other theft around some scooters that a couple of weeks ago, where it's a good piece of work by our local officers. Managed to seize the stolen scooters and arrest those involved. They were juveniles, so we do have to look at how we are going to manage those, and they end up either getting bailed or released under investigation, so that we can continue to investigate those crimes. But certainly some real positive work going on there. Hopefully I've touched on everything that I made note of. I apologise if I've missed anything. Hopefully Oliver can touch on some of the bits and add to those.
Thanks, and I'll bring Oliver. You've got your hand raised, so I'll bring you in now. It's a good segue.
Thank you, Chair. And Di's covered most of what I wanted to say, and around antisocial behaviour in particular. Just in relation to the Safer Streets initiative and the £420,000 of the very welcome investment from the Home Office. The bids were led by the Police and Crime Commissioner's Office, and the Home Office criteria are actually really tight, and they could only bid for that money for very specific output areas in a town that had the highest rates of acquisitive crime, which is why the bid is located in the readout area of Devonshire ward. In relation to the Business Crime Reduction Partnership, money that is going towards funding memberships for 160 new residential hotel and businesses in that part of town, and really does enhance the reporting network that Chief Inspector Lewis was talking about, and extends some of the benefits that we've had of the BCRP in the town centre to a whole new area of town. And the reason that there's not been much mention of some of the other initiatives that are being funded by that cash is because the implementation is very live at the moment, and is taking place as we speak, and other capital assets that are being invested on include a local CCTV network, some alligating, some improvements to pavilion gardens, and a domestic target hardening in terms of locks and security to around 80 homes in the area, and to a number of businesses also. So certainly as that programme works its way through, and it will be evaluated quite strictly by the Home Office, we'll be in a position to tell you a little more about it.
Thank you. Oh, let's start again. Thank you very much, Oliver. There are no more hands raised, so may I just take Oliver? Thank you very much for your input there. Chief Inspector Lewis, thank you so much for your time this evening. That's a really, really covered the points of the questions asked. Can I just take this time to thank you for coming back to us regarding the Brighton scrutiny review that we'll have. We're just going to we'll talk about this later on in the meeting, and then we'll start to shape that. So we'll be in touch.
Yeah, do come back to me.
Yeah, we'll do that. But that's really helpful. So, you know, as I say, thank you. Like Councillor Diplock says, thank you for everything you do. I'm with you on the vaccinations. I mean, I work in the NHS, so you know, I'm with you with police officers. It's strange, isn't it? There will always be a reason why, you know, people are above or whatever. But I know from fact of the job I do, working alongside sometimes the police, that, you know, you're in hospitals, you're in people's homes. It's not like being in one place where you've got, you know, you can have COVID protocols in a building. No. You do have, unfortunately, people spit at you, which is disgusting at the best of times. But, you know, it's certainly a COVID risk. You have to restrain people where you've got particulates, you know, people breathing on you, etc. So can I just say publicly thank you and your officers and staff that do an amazing job dealing with some very tricky situations, some really tricky people during this pandemic. So I agree with you on the vaccinations there, and hopefully with the news that's come out today with over 70s now being asked to, it will be very soon. But I don't think it can come soon enough. So thank you for everything you do.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you, Chair.
Tony.
Thank you. Okay, so let's move on to, I don't even know where I am now. I've got to look back on my here we go. So if we go on to agenda item 8, so I think if we take this in two parts, if we do part A, which will be presented by Millie. Hi, Millie. Good to see you again. And then we go on to part B afterwards. We take them in two bits, which will be Hamira. Good to see you, Hamira, again, and Andrew as well. So if we do part A first and then part B. So Millie, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everybody. I'm Millie McDevitt. I'm the performance lead for Eastbourne Borough Council. So between pages 19 and 33 in your pack, you'll have the quarter 3 report that covers the period of October to December 2020. Of course, that's when Eastbourne entered tier 4. I'm really pleased to report that performance held up despite the really challenging external conditions in the pandemic continuing. A few things I'd just like to highlight. Calls to the council remained really high, but were still answered well within our target times. We've provided all the figures there. Benefits have been processed well within our target times, and we've had a slight decrease in our numbers in emergency accommodation. There's a few performance indicators which unfortunately are slightly below target, but they are clearly linked to the restrictions imposed by COVID-19. So things like inspections or actually entering people's properties. That's been quite tricky given circumstances, and a couple of other performance indicators. But Chair, I'll leave it at that, and I'm obviously very happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Millie. I don't have any hands raised yet. I'd just like to make a point, well, a couple of points actually. So on page 24, the calls to customer first, I've been critical in the past, so I'm going to give credit where it's due. It's nice that those figures are above once again in the calls answered within 60 minutes, and the call abandonment rate, put the teeth back in, is below 2%. So you know, it's really good. So I think the work there has been brilliant, because it was certainly lagging behind for well, it's several months, but actually I think in broader terms it was over a year or two. So that's really good that trend has continued. So can I just feed that back, that positive feedback? But the other one I wanted to raise, and I think I may have raised this at the last scrutiny meeting, so please forgive me if I did, was just the targets. obviously, some of the targets are impacted by COVID. We haven't had, we haven't been operating as a council or as a town or as individuals in the same way that we were doing a year ago. But the report itself a year ago had a lot more detail in it. So it had things like about new targets for new houses being developed within the town. It had the number of affordable housing development within the town. That slipped off. And I say slipped off because I think that was in the last meeting as well. But certainly last year, and I know that the way that performance targets are looked at may change year on year. So we had one regarding carbon neutral. I think we had a target in there about reusable plastics within council offices, and it was met, and that's needs to come off. But I just wondered if there's any change looking at going forward, because it's normally cabinet that agrees these, whether there's going to be looking forward to any change coming from April this year forward, because I'm a bit concerned that several targets have disappeared from the report in the last year, and some of those were quite useful to look at. So I wondered if you can give us an update on that in a minute. I see that I'm going to do the same as I did in the last report. So I've got Councillor DeCara has raised her hand. So Penny, is there anything you'd like to add?
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Millie. Nice to see you. The first item, the percentage of council tax collected during the year, I was actually going to ask. It says that statutory reminder and final notices are due to be issued in early Q3. I was going to actually originally ask if those had gone out, but then it occurred to me, it says for those still in debt in mid-January. So I'm thinking that you wouldn't really know if they were still in debt in mid-January if the letters went out in Q3, but if that makes any kind of sense. And the other thing I was going to just ask is on the recycling and waste, the percentage of household waste sent for reuse, etc., awaiting the data. Just could I have those figures when you get them, please? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor DeCara. I don't have any other indications. Look at this, I'm multitasking. So, Millie, if I could hand back over to you, just on those points raised, please. Thank you.
Yeah, certainly, Chair. Firstly, thank you very much for what you've said about the customer contacting. I'm sure they will really appreciate that. They have worked incredibly hard to maintain their performance levels, and there's been some incredible service improvements there. On the report itself, you're right, there have been some targets, some performance indicators which were agreed by Cabinet by the portfolio holder, by Councillor Swansborough, which were, if not slightly amended, not reported this year. We've had some resource challenges. Most of the performance team are indeed supporting the recovery and reset work. So we've had a lot of our time taken away. So we had to rationalise, and we had to also change the actual format of the report because of accessibility guidelines. But I do take your point, but I didn't know if it was something more for cabinet members to agree rather than for officers ourselves. But usual practice is every financial year, before the next quarter, the targets, the performance indicators would be discussed and agreed by cabinet. I hope that answers your question, Councillor Freebody. Councillor DeCara, I think there might actually be a typo on that council tax, but I'll go back to colleagues and just double check for you. And the recycling figures, that's a perennial issue chasing our third party colleagues who I won't name on this, but yes, it's something that we pursue right up to this meeting. We're trying to get hold of those figures and haven't had any voice. So, but as soon as they do get sent to us, validated, verified, we'll be sending them out. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Millie. Well, first of all, thank you for your time this evening and going through that. I think it's for perhaps colleagues of mine who may attend the cabinet meeting to bring that up. It just seems we have fewer and fewer performance indicators than we did 4 years ago, for example. So that's the point I'm making. But thank you for your time this evening. And if you can feed that back to the team regarding the phone calls answered in 60 seconds and call abandonment rate, as I said, I have been constructively criticized. Oh, wow, I really have problems this evening. I do, it was, criticism was constructive. It was to, to try and raise this as an issue. And it's really frustrating for people to contact the council if they're having to wait on the phone for a long time. So if you can feed that back to the team, that'd be really helpful, because that has improved and it's been sustainable. Wow, I'm going to stop in a minute. It has been sustainable improvement as well. So that's really good to see. So credit where it's due. If you could feed that back, that'd be great. But Millie, thank you very much for that, for your time. And I'm going to go on to part, I have no more hands raised that I can see. So I'm going to go on to part B. I see that Andrew is here. So Andrew and Hamira, if I can't see Hamira at the moment on my screen, if you'd like to present your part, and then again, I'll ask, hi Hamira, there you are. Good to see you again. So I will ask you to present your part of your report, and then councillors, if you can raise your hand if there's any points that you'd like to raise for Andrew and Hamira. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the financial monitoring at the end of December. At that point in time, the General Fund had a shortfall of just under 4.3 million, which was an increase of 978,000 on the previous quarter. Biggest losses are as previously reported and as expected in terms of income shortfalls. We've also had additional costs in respect of emergency accommodation and shortfalls in housing subsidy, on IT costs, and also on homelessness additional accommodation. At this point in the year, it's in line with where we're expecting the final outturn to be for the revised estimate, which is around about 5.6 million. But if I can defer any further comments on that point until I do the budget report next, which will update the overall position going forward. Just on the other items, the most significant item to draw your attention to is in relation to the business rates position, which had a shortfall, rather a deficit of 3.2 million. And under the government's new regulations, that is to be spread over 3 years, and will also attract a 75% grant to offset it going forward. And that's built into the budget report, which is the next item on the agenda. I'll leave it there for now, Chair, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Andrew. I'm looking at hands. There we go. Councillor Smart.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Andrew. I mean, obviously, this is actually, I think, our third discussion today on some of these subjects. So I'll be very brief. I mean, I think that the Q3 figures have tended to be superseded effectively by the revised budget for the whole year. So, I mean, I wouldn't dwell on it. But since we're here, obviously, one of the variances in the third quarter, cumulatively, is something you and I were discussing during the day, which is the housing benefit payments subsidy. It's shown there as a variance of 539,000. I think you and I agreed that by the time it gets to the end of the year, it's anticipated to be 1.1 million. So it's a serious issue. I was still unclear as to exactly what that is. Is that predominantly, is any of that hiring extra people, or is it all payments out to people? And to what extent is it covered? Because I think there's still an open debate on this by the recompense you are requesting from government. So it sits there as a negative variance. I have a suspicion, and perhaps we need to discuss this out of thing, but you might sort of just give a starting point on this, is that in some ways you are arbitrarily, I think, allocating the monies that government receive, grants that they give you to various items. I mean, we can talk about that on the annual position, but it crops up here on the third quarter. But I'd just like to understand absolutely clearly what that variance is on housing benefit payments and subsidy.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Smart. I can't see any other hands up. Look at that. Wow. Okay, so Andrew, straight over to you.
Thank you. It doesn't relate to additional staffing costs. It does relate purely to the loss of subsidy on additional emergency accommodation. So certain elements of cost attract a percentage of subsidy, which is repaid to us by government, and certain other elements attract a lower percentage. So the additional cost that we're incurring is attracting a lower percentage of subsidy. So it's the net position that's actually creating that cost. In terms of the government grant, the emergency grant, it is there to primarily cover off the immediate costs of, say, food packages or additional support to external bodies, third parties, affected by COVID in terms of distributing food parcels, etc. It's there to cover any immediate IT costs, but it is also available to cover off additional costs such as housing benefit. The allocation of that grant won't become specifically clear until we get to the outturn position, until we've actually seen what those emergency additional costs were for the year, and then we will allocate it accordingly.
Okay. Councillor Smart.
Thank you, Andrew. Yes, I mean, I think you're actually confirming to me that there is an arbitrary allocation you're going to make at the end of the year. In full year terms, it's the 1.755 million, isn't it? And some of this could go against this particular item. Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smart. Okay, I don't have any other hands raised. Councillor Smart, if you can lower your hand, that would be great. So I think that has gone down now. So I will move on to the next part of the agenda, which is agenda item 9, which is the general fund budget for 2021-22 and a capital programme, which is pages 53 to 88 in your pack. Hamira and Andrew again. So who'd like to start? Hamira, we haven't heard from you for a while, so...
I'll have a go, Chair, and then I'll pass.
Thank you.
All the difficult questions can be asked from Andrew.
Excellent. I love that. I love that style. That's good.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Hamira Javadi. I'm the Council Chief Finance Officer. The report that you have tonight in front of you is a long time in making, and some very key aspects of it is actually quite familiar because we've been going through a number of member briefings, and some of the key challenges that we've faced as a result of the impact of COVID has already been reported on various forums to members in some details. So basically, the report, we are asking the Scrutiny Committee to act as critical friend, and if you have any comments, any advice for us to take back to Cabinet and full Council, then more than happy to do that. The report is a very, if you like, a step-by-step process. It captures the position as it was in September when we issued the draft medium-term financial strategy. It provides a little bit of a context in terms of what has been very specific to this year's challenge in setting the budget. The budget is a little bit of a sort of, if you like, a story of two halves. What's happening in terms of financial implications for 2021, the current fiscal year, and of course, most importantly, how do we go about setting out the budget for 21-22 when there's a huge still level of uncertainty attached to what assumptions to use in determining the council's income levels, but also any additional and unusual expenditure. So since we started the medium-term financial strategy, we continued our discussions with the Ministry of Housing and Communities and Local Government, because we were very clear that the impact of COVID on the council's budgetary position was significant. And throughout this process, the budget was developed based on a number of scenarios. What we included in this report was at the time the most likely scenario, and that was to be in a position of receiving some degree of support or flexibility from the government, and basically making or formulating a budget that was based on meeting the financial shortfall for this year as the revised budget, but also next year's original budget, whilst the council is working as proactively as possible towards realizing the benefits or saving targets associated with the council's recovery and reset program. So one of the sort of key aspects of the report is really just to sort of include the budgetary assumptions that is detailed in the report, then followed on with the spending review and the impact of the spending review. Of course, that's all based on our understanding of some of the key implications through the revised budget, because that sets out the baseline for the budget for next year. How is that affecting our capital program and financing, which is a very key component of the efficiency and saving program? And also the very key fact, of course, the Secretary of State's approval for the council to be able to capitalise its expenditure for 2021 and 21-22. And this will be allowing the council to have the lead time that it needs to react and address some of the financial challenges left to manage by the impact of COVID, and have almost sort of just more than a year to do so. So the report heavily relies on 4 key aspects, and these are quite key. One of them is the success of recovery and reset. There's a huge saving target of over £2.5 million attached to recovery and reset, in addition to some of the more visible savings. It relies heavily on economic recovery. Council's income is very much reliant on the tourism economy, and also the council is very much a driving force behind the borough's tourism economy. So the two go hand in hand. The other aspect is the fact that we are now revising the capital programme in a way that reduces the cost of financing. And again, that has an impact in terms of how we are rephasing the capital programme and extending the delivery of the programme over a longer period, subject to continuous review. So those are really sort of some of the key aspects of the strategy that we have framed the budget around. As you know, the report sort of makes references to the financial position and what would have been had we not received the support from the government, and also the fact that reminds members that all throughout this process of engaging with the government, we have been discussing 3 possible scenarios, and that was ranging from receiving 100% financial support from the government, and the least, if you like, favourite in terms of the council's position would have been the capitalisation, and that entailed either disposal of our asset or borrowing to pay the cost of COVID. And in doing so, both of them would either a disposal of asset or capitalisation would create additional financial costs that a council need to pay for. And of course, there was a halfway house sort of 50-50 split between the government. And of course, the capitalisation, the letter from the minister has confirmed that it's the offer on the table is for the 100% capitalisation, and the cost of that capitalisation has now been included in the budget report. We estimate that the cost for a full year to be in the region of £750,000. Of course, that will be added to the savings target that the council is having to meet. Added to the report is a sort of macroeconomic information in terms of the economic performance and the trajectory of economic performance nationally. We can also draw our conclusions that what would that mean for the borough's economy. We are also sort of making some very key assumptions about the pace of the recovery for next year. The council is heavily reliant on income from tourism, and whereas previously we had assumed a 50% reduction in income. After the spending review announcement, we have actually scaled that down to 30% reduction in tourism income from tourism and enterprise. The report provides a detailed analysis of the spending review and the funding allocations, followed by what, if any, of the impact of any of those funding allocations and measure of those relating to the council's financial settlement. The report provides you with a very high-level summary of all of those funding allocation in a table, followed by key variances which we have captured in section 6 of the report relating to the revised position. And also in appendix 1 of the report, you will see a summary of key movements and key budgetary position. The report also is asking for members to consider another set of recommendations, which is to do with the aspiration homes, which is a partnership, a limited partnership between the council, Eastbourne Borough Council and Lewis District Council, and this is to help their housing, including housing development initiatives. Of course, what is this? What the aspiration home is allowing the council to do is to maximise its flexibility in use of right to buy receipts, and the report is asking for additional lending to be afforded to aspiration home in order to maximise the council's opportunities in utilising the right to buy receipts and remove the risk of having to return some of that back at a cost and a penalty to the government. I think those are some of the key headlines that I've covered here. Of course, Andrew is here, and between two of us, I think we can answer if there are any detailed questions that you wish us to respond to. And I'm going to pause at this point and happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Amira. I'm looking for indications of questions. Wow, there we go. Well, Councillor Smart. Councillor Smart, would you like to ask a question? You're muted, Councillor Smart.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Amira. Having had 2 meetings on these subjects today already, Amira, I wouldn't press my luck in terms of going into more detail on this. Actually, I don't want to ask a question. I think that the request is that this scrutiny committee makes recommendations to the cabinet, and I would simply want to make one recommendation. I was pleased to receive a copy of the letter from the MHCLG with their generous offer, and I would like to propose that this committee recommend to Cabinet that they take up the offer with alacrity. Thank you.
Marvellous. Thank you very much, Councillor Smart. I don't have any further hands, so there's no points there, Hamira. So I will go straight on to the recommendation on there. So recommendations are that we consider the general revenue budget and the capital programme. So can I ask if everyone agrees on recommendation 1?
Agreed.
Yeah, I'm seeing lots of nodding, so it might be easier if anyone's got any objections to raise their hands. And then on officer recommendation 2, the scrutiny response of the Cabinet with any recommendations it wishes to be considered. Councillor Smart's proposal there. So do I have a seconder for Councillor Smart's proposal? Councillor De Cara, I saw you do this. Yep, lovely, thank you. So,
Chairman, sorry, may I just interrupt for a moment, please?
Of course you may, Hamira.
Just to again, I think really just for completeness, to make members aware that the Secretary of State's letter to the Leader of the Council, Councillor Todd, had requested a respond to the offer by tomorrow, and my understanding is that Councillor Todd is intending to accept the offer, and he'll be responding tomorrow to his query.
Lovely, thank you very much, Hamira. But as that was proposed by Councillor Smart and Councillor De Cara, and it looks like it's going to, that will be accepted by Cabinet tomorrow. Can I just ask all those in favour of that recommendation, please? I've got thumbs up and hands up, and anyone against? You have to raise a virtual hand, I think. Nope. Okay, splendid. So we'll take that as read. I need to. You'll have to excuse me, committee. Remiss of me for not picking up the recommendations on the other agenda items. So I will ask if we can just go back to agenda item 7, which was the Community Safety Partnership Annual Report, that the Scrutiny Committee reviews the achievements and activities of Eastbourne and Lewes Community Safety Partnership in 2020-21, and consider any recommendations it wishes to make to the Cabinet. So I don't think there are any recommendations, but I think we reviewed the achievements. So all those in favour? Yeah. Against? Can't see any. Splendid. And then on agenda item 8, it was just to note the progress and performance in Q3. So I presume that's...
3 years, Nick in Democratic Services, Councillor Burton did have a hand up.
Sorry, missed that. I was reading. I can't multitask. Councillor Burton.
It was just for the previous item. I just wanted to say a big thank you to Hamira and her team, because I know what a huge piece of work this has been and how stressful for everyone. So I just wanted to say thank you and well done.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Burton. We'll do that at the end of this. So can we just agree that we note the progress and performance for Q3 in agenda item 8? All those in favour? Yeah. Against? No. Lovely. So hold on. I was multitasking rather well, and it's just gone wrong. Here we go. So on... Where are we? That was agenda item 10. So Hamira, I don't see any other agenda items on here, but once again, Hamira, if I can thank you, as Councillor Burton said as well, your thanks to you and your team. Finance is a key part of the council's business. It wouldn't run if we didn't have any finances. So can I just say thank you to the work of you and your team to get these reports out to us so that we can review that as a committee. So thank you, Hamira.
Much appreciated. Thank you very much indeed.
No worries. So if we go on to, I haven't thanked Andrew because, Andrew, we've got the housing revenue account budget for 2021-22, which are pages 149 to 162 in our packs. So Andrew, would you like to make any comment before I open it up for questions, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'll just note that there's the treasury management item before that.
Do you know what? Every meeting there's something. Thank you very much. Let me go back. Oh yes. Oh, Ola. Sorry, Ola. That's okay. That's terrible. Oh my word. Right. Okay. Sorry, Ola. I was wanted to hear Andrew again, but Ola, it's good to see you. So, if we go to agenda item 10, which is the treasury management and prudential indicators, capital strategy and investment strategy. So, Ola, welcome. Good to see you again, and over to you. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you, Chair. I'm Ola Owolabi. I'm the Deputy Finance Officer. In line with the budget setting, the Treasury management strategy has to be agreed on annual basis as well. This is about looking after our borrowing, our investment, our cash flow, banking, our money market, not forgetting the effective control of all the risk associated with this money. However, for 21-22 in particular, we've spent huge amount of time reviewing our capital program. Omira made reference to that earlier, and one of the reasons is to reduce our borrowing need. We are not saying we will not be able to undertake borrowing need, but we will only do that when it is absolutely necessary. So the Council will continue to assess all financing options when making long-term borrowing and when making decisions in terms of where we divert our resources into. I would like to stress as well that most of our borrowing is mainly for capital program, and we tend to get them from PWLB. Something that is new this year is that the PWLB recently embarked on consultation, and the outcome of that consultation is that they will no more lend to any councils that plans to buy investment properties primarily to make money, a yield. However, they made that clear as well in terms of saying we will still be able to provide all the council affordable limit once that money will be spent on service activities, housing activities, regeneration activities, treasury management activities. There might be occasion where some of those activities might crossfire as well. The decision in terms of whether to borrow or not to borrow, that will be left with the chief finance officers. In terms of our investment, going forward, although one hasn't got huge amount of investment, however, we'll still got a bit of surplus cash, which we tend to put through our counterparties. Going forward, there is a clear indication that our investment, we will not be making huge amount of money through our investment. Some of those money markets, even PWLB, are now offering a negative interest rate. Therefore, we have reviewed the counterparties and tried to identify which of our counterparties, financial institution, where we can at least get some sort of return back rather than putting our money in negative investment. So Appendix A to this report covers everything we are planning to do this year, including the prudential code, including the capital strategy. And I'm happy to stop there and to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ola, and good to see you again. I will look for hands. I mean, one comment on that I'd like to make is, some of my colleagues have been looking at investments over the years by the Borough Council. I can understand some of them and supported some of them, but can also, especially, COVID has accelerated, should we say, some of the risks regarding investments in things like retail parks, etc. Which I think I said a couple of years ago that I always thought was a risk, but COVID has accelerated that. And it's then when those we're looking for the investment returns and money in the yield to give us something back. It's just not doing that now, and the future for that is pretty uncertain, to be honest. So I'm absolutely I agree with the government on that, but I'm just looking at see if I've got any other hands to go up. I knew there'd be one. Councillor Smart, fantastic, good. Councillor Smart, over to you.
Well, I didn't want to leave Ola sitting there.
Absolutely.
Councillor Robert Smart, Meads Ward. Ola, obviously we've had a discussion on some of these issues today, and thank you for the additional information you provided me in terms of the headroom on borrowing. We're not encouraging more borrowing, but useful to know where the headroom is. As with the last item, having really discussed in terms of the detailed treasury management, I've given praise for the way that some of the detailed treasury management is undertaken, and I don't have problems with that. It is actually the presentation of information that causes me the problem, and I've got another interesting proposal perhaps for this committee to make to the Cabinet, and that is in line with good financial practice that a cash flow for the year is produced and is reported against it. Coming from the private sector, I find it very odd that there is no cash flow here. We have all sorts of issues, and dare I say it, I mean, at the end of the day, some of the macroeconomic stuff is interesting, but I'm really interested in what's going on in Eastbourne Borough Council. And, I've said in previous years that there sadly is no cash flow produced. And effectively, when you're concerned about the potential liquidity of the council, as distinct from its potential borrowing position, I think that the cash flow reporting is a financially good practice. And I would simply like to make that proposal from this committee to Cabinet, so that when the budget book comes out, hopefully at the end of this month, it has attached to it a cash flow for the year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Smart. Ola, I saw you had your hand. I would always give you the right to reply, Ola. But before I do so, I'm just going to see if there's any other councillors would like to make comment or ask a question. God, it's silent, isn't it? Right. Okay. Well, it's fine. Ola, we get to hear from you again, which is great. So, Ola, over to you on Councillor Smart's point.
Thank you. Ola Wilabi again, Deputy Chief Finance Officer. Thank you so much, Councillor Smart. Again, that's a very good question in terms of having a cash flow monitoring. I think it's something that we can look into and see how we will be able to do that, because as you know, we have a cash flow that is an internal document and it's a live document that is changing every time. If we're going to come back to this committee with a cash flow, that will be at a particular point in time. However, we will look at how we could do that. In addition to that, it is a requirement under the production of council account to have a cash flow statement. So within the account, there are cash flow statement, there are a series of notes detailing and telling the story in terms of where we are with the cash flow. But I do get your point. We're looking to what we could do to be able to come back to this committee in terms of what the cash flow tends to look like. Thanks so much.
Oops, there we go. Thank you, Ola. So, Councillor Smart, I'm going to come back to you. So the Ola replied to your point. So what's the recommendation that you would like to put in? Because we're going to recommendations in a second. So what's the recommendation you'd like to propose?
The recommendation I'd like to propose is that a cash flow for a projected cash flow for the year is produced and reported against it on quarterly stages.
Thank
By the
you
way,
very much.
Just so you don't get too fear of this, I mean, one's not after pound shilling small amounts of money, but there's some very large flows going through there, and we are effectively unsighted in terms of liquidity.
Okay, so I can't see any other hands. So what I'm going to do is, so the recommendations are in two parts. So the first part is that the Scrutiny Committee considers the Treasury Management and Prudential Indicators, which we, hold on, there's a hand up. I will allow it. Councillor Rodahan.
I, for the life of me, don't see why we need another cash flow. Council finance papers are full of cash flows. They're all at a point of time. All cash flows are at a point of time. And I certainly won't be voting for another one.
Okay, so let me just hold on. Okay, so your point, Councillor Rodahan, is there's cash flow in various reports. Yeah. However, I'll go back to the officer. So I'm going to go back to you, Ola. Ola was saying that there could be a sheet that's attached. So I'm getting a bit confused. It's almost, you're saying it is in there, but it isn't in there, or it could be. How easy is it just to have a cash flow sheet attached to the budget, Ola?
What I'm trying to explain is that the council has got a cash flow. It's mainly used for internal management of our affairs in terms of payments going out, income coming in. That is it. However, I do agree with the other comment in terms of we have series in terms of budget monitoring. Your budget monitoring will show your expenditure, will show your income. Part of your income is money coming in or projected money coming in. However, because Councillor Smart raised this as a decision, that is why I say officers will hopefully go away and look at what we can do. We give way to Amira.
Okay. Hamira, do you want to? You had your hand raised. Do you want to come in there?
Yes, I'm just going to give a little bit of an explanation so that committee has got a full picture. So, Chairman, one of the significant differences between public sector and private sector is that we do have a statutory responsibility to set a budget, and that budget is based on the council's ability to meet all its income and expenditure and the cash flow, money coming in, money going out. Effectively, by setting the budget, you're committing to a manageable cash flow. And because of that, it has never been a requirement for the committee to review the transactional aspects of the cash flow. What we have in place is the governance that you decide, and the Audit and Governance Committee set the policies and principles that helps the officers to put in place the arrangements for investments and lending and borrowing. So basically, the council, through its committee arrangements, sets the policies, and within that, the policy framework, the officers administer that policy. Cash flow is part of that. So I think there needs to be possibly a consideration about what added value having a cash flow statement, especially considering some of the income coming in and expenditure going out. There's a significant kind of, if you like, time lapse. Some of our income comes in within the next 3 months, first 3 months of the financial year. Some of the expenditures are very much a sort of, if you like, final account adjustments that we need to kind of make sure that. So there are timing issues that need not necessarily apply to local government cash flow system. I can see a great benefit in private sector since their financial well-being is determined by the amount of money flowing in and out of the organisation. But some of our big income is from business rate, is from council tax, is from government, and that necessity has removed by having to set a budget that ensures that you have got the financial ability to meet your expenditure.
Thank you very much, Amira. Councillor Rodahan, your hand's still raised.
My hand is on my chin.
No, your virtual hand.
Sorry.
Right. Councillor Smart.
Yes, thank you, Hamira. I mean, clearly, you know, a lot of stuff in local government effectively is prescriptive by government and what government actually asks. I think everybody of a financial nature will recognise that a cash flow is a good financial practice. And effectively, as Ola said, you're actually managing cash flow internally. Clearly, as you mentioned, Hamira, there are timing differences, and that is exactly why one actually needs to look at the cash flow as well as the income and expenditure statement. It would be good financial practice. I think you actually effectively have it, but we are unsighted of it. Thank you.
Sorry, I was doing the mortal sin of talking with muted. Thank you, Councillor Smart. Councillor Burton.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, Councillor Smart, initially I thought, yes, it can't do any harm. But from what I've heard Hamira say, actually, it seems like it would just be an unnecessary procedure for officers to go through and a piece of work that's just not needed because we have a different process than a private organisation would have. So I think it's adding an extra layer of work to officers that are really overstretched at the moment that just actually wouldn't help the oversight. I'm all for oversight, absolutely, but I don't feel that this would add to the reporting that happens at the moment, to be honest.
Councillor Maxted.
Thank you, Chair. I feel that having a cash flow forecast, because of the problems and delays in payments and so on, it wouldn't really give an on-the-spot measure of where we are, because there are so many other variables to take into account. The fact that if we were to have a cash flow forecast, I think the finance officers would spend half an hour or an hour explaining what it was all about. So I certainly in the private sector, I think they're invaluable, but I just don't think it would be appropriate. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Maxted. I've got no other hands. I just on that point there, Councillor, I don't think it was a forecast that was looking for. I thought it was a breakdown of cash flow at the end of when it's reported. Councillor Smart.
No, Chair. I mean, sorry if I've given you the wrong impression. No, I am talking about a cash flow forecast for the year to be reported against. I mean, clearly, there's a lot of after the event reporting, and I think there is a cash flow actually produced in the annual accounts, I think, from memory. You know, but that's water under the bridge at that stage. But at the moment, we are effectively unsighted in terms of the liquidity issues.
Well, look, Councillor Smart, unless you've got your virtual hand still up, you've made a proposal, so we'd need a seconder. Oh God, put my teeth in. Seconder for Councillor Smart's proposal. Oh, sorry, your hand was blurry there, Councillor Takara. It's back. Okay. So that's the recommendation. So we've got a seconder and a proposer and a seconder. Can I have a show of hands for, please? It'd be easier to do this virtually because I suspect that this will need to be counted properly. So can you raise your virtual hands if you agree? So I've got 1, 2, 3. So if everyone lower their hands, and then can I have a virtual hands against? Oops. Surprise, surprise. Councillor Smart, your virtual hand's been up both, but I presume you're not. Okay, so that hasn't been carried. I don't have any other recommendations from anyone, so the second one is to respond with any recommendations. Well, there aren't any because nobody agreed any. Councillor Rodahan, your hand's up, your virtual hand. Did you want to make a recommendation? It's back down again. Okay, it's like the okie dokie tonight. Fantastic. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Ola, as well, for your time this evening. And Andrew, I bigged you up, and then I swept away the rug from under your feet. So, Andrew, if you'd like to start with agenda item 11, which is the housing revenue account budget and rent setting and capital programme. Andrew, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Andrew Clark, Deputy Chief Finance Officer. The report is the usual annual report which sets out the increases in housing rents and service charges and provides an update on the overall housing revenue account position for this year and for next year, and also sets out the revised capital programme position for this year and future years. In terms of the actual housing revenue account side, we are projecting a surplus of about 310,000 for this year and 389,000 for next year. That will fall into the working balance as usual, but we're also taking money out of that balance to fund the capital programme. So we're taking out 1.781 this year and a further 3.085 next year. In terms of the actual capital programme itself, there is additional spend allocated to new build. So we've got just over 10 million next year, rising to 21 million, and then a further 13 million in 23-24. And we have an acquisitions annual allocation of about 4.7 to 4.9 million. In terms of funding, the biggest change will be in respect of 22-23, whereby our borrowing will increase to 23 million. And then reduce again the year after to about 14.5 million. I shall leave it there for now, Chair, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Any questions? Councillor Smart.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Andrew. I mean, actually, there's going to be a curious question for you. I actually looked at the Lewis accounts, and I didn't spend a lot of time looking at the Lewis accounts, but actually when I looked at them, I saw that in the general fund, through the next few years, there is a £4 million credit coming through on the general fund, which is called, I think, housing revenue. From memory, I think that in terms of Eastbourne itself, to close off the March 20 accounts, I believe there was a 1.6 million payment from Eastbourne Homes. But anyway, that aside, I don't know if either Hamira or Andrew could shed any light on the Lewis position and whether that has any, whether there are any significant differences between Eastbourne and Lewis, which actually generates this £4 million credit in Lewis, but we don't have in Eastbourne.
Thank you, Councillor Smart. I can't see any other hands, so Andrew, I'm going to go back over to you.
If I just may just
or Hamira, go on. It's fine.
Sorry, Chair. And then pass on to Andrew to give the details, as is the pattern. So is slightly to do with the presentation of the accounts, Councillor Smart. So whereas in Eastbourne, we actually present the general fund in its net position, in Lewis, the accounts are presented in gross position and then a credit as a recharge to the housing revenue accounts. So it's just a presentational issue. It is something that we can actually standardize and is part of our plan to standardize for future reporting, but that is just the way that the accounts are presented.
Thank you, Hamira. Andrew, is there any detail you'd like to add?
Only to say that it is being standardised for this next year.
Lovely, thank you. Councillor Smart.
Yes, that begs the question, which way will you standardise it?
The Eastbourne way.
That's brought a smile to your face, Councillor Smart. Any other questions? I'm just aware that it seems to be the same councillors asking the questions. It'd be quite good if you know, this is a, can I just, you know, scrutiny is a good chance to be, we've always used it as a critical friend, and it's always been something that I think we can do well in Eastbourne. But I'm just aware that the same councillors are asking questions all the time. Well, but that's it then, Andrew. Nothing, you know, I bigged you up for 2 minutes. But so can I just go over to the councillors that the officer's recommendations that the note report as attached in Appendix 1. No, wrong one. That's agenda item 12. I've gone ahead. Oh, lost my bit of paper. Sorry. Here we go. That we've considered the housing revenue account budget, revenue budget and rent setting and capital programme. And we respond with any recommendations. There aren't any recommendations, but we have considered the report. Agreed? Anyone against? Use your virtual hand. I can see better. No? Fabulous. Thank you very much, Andrew and Hamira. And we'll go on to agenda item 12, which is the response to the public consultation on waste collections. And I understand Bryn maybe is joined with Jane Goodall. So Bryn and Jane, welcome. Hope we haven't kept you too long, but thank you very much for taking the time this evening. So I'll leave it over to you.
Thanks, Councillor. Jane, did you want to say a few words before I start talking?
Yep, good evening everybody. Jane Goodall. I'm the Strategy and Partnership Lead for Quality Environment, which includes waste. The context to this report tonight is that I came to Scrutiny last February, actually, 3rd of February 2020, and we were talking then about how to improve recycling. And one of the things that some of the information I brought to you was, one, that recycling in Eastbourne has plateaued, and two, that from waste composition analysis about 4 years ago now, but it still holds because nothing's changed, we saw that about 25% of what was put in the residual waste, that's the refuse that goes to the facility at New Haven, about 25% of that was recyclable. So if you like, we needed to find a way to get people to take their recycling out of the rubbish and put it in the recycling container. So that is the sort of context to the work that we've been doing ever since then. And tonight we're going to talk to you about the consultation. Bryn will, he's the expert, talk about the response we had from the public. And then I've provided a report just to say what the next steps are with Cabinet on Wednesday. So I'll leave it there and hand over to Bryn, if I may.
Thanks, Jane. Yes, I'm Bryn Movey, the Communications and Engagement Lead. I'll give a little bit of context about the process and thinking behind the consultation itself. You've seen the consultation report, but I'll go through kind of key points of that. Let's talk about the equality and fairness analysis element of that in particular, and happy to take any questions. So part of my role is to oversee the council's corporate consultation process to make sure that they meet the gunning principles set out in the law and that they adhere to the best practice prescribed by the Consultation Institute. So as a minimum, this is to avoid the risk of judicial review, but more importantly, it's to make sure our consultations are genuine and help members and officers make appropriate decisions on behalf of our stakeholders. So usually my role is around supporting and providing guidance to officers in the services which service areas that are consulting. But in the case of this consultation, I took lead responsibility for it myself, purely because of the potential level of impact upon all residents in the borough, and it being of a much higher profile than many of our other consultations. So it also helps to have someone that's completely removed from the service area in which the consultation is taking place, to allow for a greater degree of impartiality, particularly when it comes to things like comment analysis, where you have to kind of make judgment calls. So it removes that the conflict of interest, if you will. So of equal importance of getting the consultation process right was the need for this really robust equality and fairness analysis. and we were fortunate enough to have had Devon Briggs as the lead officer on this element. And it's fair to say that it's as good as a quality and fairness analysis as certainly as I've ever seen. And Devon presented this work to the Equality and Fairness Stakeholder Group last week. And they, the group spoke very highly of the depth of the analysis, the level of response to the consultation, the quota of disabled respondents, and the sorts of mitigations that we're looking at if the proposals are adopted. So more on that in a minute. But just a few things I'd like to highlight. So we've run the consultation for 12 weeks, which is what the Consultation Institutes recommend as best practice. There's no set duration for a consultation. It just has to be long enough to afford all potential respondents an opportunity to respond. So 12 weeks, best practice. We ran it from September through to the end of December last year. We were really happy with the level of participation in the consultation. So we received just under 1,600 responses. And that's a good response by anyone's standard. So for comparison, the residence survey, which the council conducts roughly every 4 years, and is largely the basis for the corporate plan and corporate planning cycle, that sets a target of 1,100 for the survey to be considered to be a statistically significant piece of research. So we by far kind of exceeded that. And also another element that's worth highlighting is that we were very clear with residents about the scope of the consultation, and this being, we were exploring what the impact of the proposals would be on residents, rather than asking stakeholders whether they wanted the change or not, sort of a soft referendum. Of course, there are lots of opportunities within the consultation survey to express disagreement with the proposals, but throughout our kind of framing and marketing and throughout the questions itself, we were always very clear that this is something we're very much thinking of doing, and the consultation is to help us understand what mitigations need to be put in place. And that's particularly relevant when it comes to people with protected characteristics. So in addition to the usual promotion of the consultation, it received a kind of high levels of engagement on social media and was picked up by the local press as well you'd expect. We invited responses directly from the Disability Involvement Group, from the Eastbourne Faith Forum, from the Eastbourne Seniors Forum, from Born Out LGBT, from the Eastbourne Cultural Involvement Group, and from 3VA. And we also went and presented to a few of those groups as well. And those groups helped us publicise the consultation with their networks. So we were really happy with the level of response of people with protected characteristics, particularly those with kind of physical disabilities. So in terms of, I'll just pause there, actually. Sorry, that's an awful lot of talking. I'll just pause there to see if there are any questions up to now before I start talking about what people told us through the consultation.
Okay, thank you, Bryn. I'm looking. No, you're all clear, Bryn.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
So, yeah, in terms of who responded, we had 1,578 respondents. 62% were female, 36% were male. 15% identified themselves as having a disability or long-term health condition. So, you know, a really good representative kind of sample, if you will. 15.5% of respondents identified themselves as having a caring responsibility, and the vast majority of respondents 84% were aged between 35 and 75, but we had respondents in all age groups. So in terms of what we're asking, 85% of respondents stated they considered recycling to be very important. And we asked people how often they fill up their waste bins and their recycling bins. So half of respondents said their bins were generally full. Their refuse bins were full on the day of collection. Of course, half said they weren't. And 82% of respondents said their recycling bins were generally full on the day of collection, which sort of makes sense because that's currently a fortnightly collection. Asking people when we ask people the sorts of things that fill up their refuse bin, the big ticket items were packaging that can't be recycled, food waste, and kind of nappies, with kind of children's nappies, and then kind of personal infectious waste, sanitary waste, and that sort of thing. And then one of the really key questions was, what will the positive or negative impacts of moving to alternate weekly collections be, or what would they have on the respondents' household? And so the things that came up through that were concerns about hygiene, concerns about the mess, concern about the smell or vermin, concerns about bins being too full or overflowing. Lots and lots of respondents saying that they thought the changes would have no impact on them at all, or very little impact. In fact, many respondents saying they supported the changes. People telling us that they'd need more refuse capacity, and people telling us they'd need more recycling capacity. And then there was quite a lot of feedback about concerns around shared bins. So bins, kind of the large bins that you get in flats and houses of multiple occupancy. So we hand this stuff over to strategic and operational colleagues to start looking at the mitigations around all of this. And one of the key things to emphasise is that the service is proposing to keep flats and quite a lot of properties in the town centre on weekly refuse collections, certainly for the kind of foreseeable, to keep things under review, in the interest of keeping the town tidy and pleasant, and where we can keep an eye on things, and we've also the consultation as a piece of research has really informed what our forward plan of communications engagement around waste and recycling is going to be, particularly in the lead up to the changes, but beyond, as we seek to drive up the recycling rate. So I'm going to pause again and take any questions you have up to now.
I'm again looking around. Well, I say I'm looking around. I'm not. I'm looking at a screen. Let's be honest, Bryn, to see if there's any hands up at this stage. Councillor Smart.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Robert Smart Meads. Thank you, Bryn. I was going to keep quiet, actually, based on what you just said, Chairman, but I couldn't keep myself quiet. If you look at the answers to question 2, where 50% of people said that their waste bins were full, that's based on a weekly collection, isn't it? And then 82% suggested that their recycling bins were full, which is on a fortnightly collection. Yeah. What are the logical conclusions that might be to have reverse the collection ratios? I mean, I think that or to alter the sizes of bins. I mean, there are other alternatives there, I suspect, rather than necessarily jumping to alternate weekly collections, which seems to have a bit of a buzz about it.
Thank you, Councillor Smart. Bryn, do you want to? I've got. Oh, Jane's raised her hand as well. So, Jane, did you want to respond to that?
Well, only that I think it's fair on Bryn if I do. I mean, it did raise some interesting questions for us. We have, for one, we've set the standard size of a refuse bin as a 240 litre bin, and I think lots of the standard refuse bins in Eastbourne at the moment are probably smaller than that. So there's something about giving increased capacity, and that will be part of this new service, part of the proposal. If people need another recycling bin, we're happy to provide that because we do want to incentivise or encourage recycling. We'll also be running, as I said at the beginning, in sort of setting the context. We know that people are putting material in their rubbish bin that could be recycled, so that will increase capacity in the refuse bin. We will be running, I think you may have received a bulletin last week, a sort of how to reduce, reuse, recycle type bulletin. We'll be running campaigns or education, communication on washing and squashing, so you make more space in your recycling bin. But at the end of the day, we have this proposal is intended to help meet financial challenges of the service, and it's intended to meet the climate change commitments that we've made in reducing the number of trucks on the road. So I think just switching around and providing more a weekly recycling service won't really do any of that. So we've got a number of things that we want to help with here. Thank you. I'll leave it there.
Okay, I've got Councillor De Cara, and then actually I'd quite like to make a point as well. Councillor De Cara.
Thank you, Chair. It was just a point on in the report on the response. I mean, I appreciate, Bryn, you're saying this isn't a referendum. I appreciate that fact, and it was around getting people's feelings around the proposed changes. But I was a little bit surprised that one of the questions, do you have any other comments on the proposed changes? And 344 people actually said keep weekly refuse collections, and that wasn't highlighted in the report, which I think is, a not insignificant number. I mean, it's 20-odd%, so it's quite a significant, and was in fact the highest comment. So just surprised that wasn't highlighted, just to get a little bit of balance there. Thank you.
Okay, well, Bryn or Jane, I'll let you come back to that in a second. Councillor Rodahan. You're muted, Councillor Rodahan.
I welcome the report. We know that our recycling is well down from where it should be. We also know that we have decided to make this a green town, and it's not good to have heavy lorries trundling about any more often than they need to. So what we're following actually is the example of our neighbouring Conservative councils. They found a solution to have collection every other week. And I don't normally admit it, but I'm glad we're following them. There are going to be challenges. We're going to have to do education. We've started that. We're going to make certain that all our residents can actually move larger bins to have larger bins. But I've no doubt we will overcome it. I've no doubt that it'll be better for Eastbourne, and it will be better for our residents as well.
Thank you, Councillor Rodahan. Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think this change just brings us in line with many other councils around the country, actually. I was a resident in Wealdon when they made their change, and all of the same concerns from residents were brought up then. But actually, it does prove that recycling rates do go up. We know that from the evidence. And I think this is a really good move financially and environmentally, and we have to look to the future. As I say, there are so many other councils doing this. This is a proved effective measure that we're taking, and I'm really proud that we're going to do this. And I think the education that you're already starting to put out will be absolutely key to that, and it's really good to see that, because actually in Wilden at the time I don't think that was happening. So I think it's really, really positive. And I think residents will get used to it. I was actually surprised at the amount of positive chatter on social media around this consultation as well. I expected it to all be negative, and it really wasn't. It looked roughly like a 50-50 split to me. So it's really interesting. And as I say, I think residents will get used to the fact that they just need to adjust their habits, and it will help the environment ultimately.
Thank you very much, Councillor Burton. Just some points I just wanted to make, really. I mean, just beware of fortnightly collections, that your recycling rate is going to go up and stay up. Hastings Borough Council have had fortnightly collections for years, and last 2019 their recycling rate was less than 30%. It was 29%. It was in the bottom 10, I think, in the country. So, you know, just going to fortnightly doesn't shoot your recycling rates up, and I think we need to be clear on that. Just looking, Bryn, I think the equality impact assessment, I think, is really good, especially for people with disabilities. I'm not so sure what my gender means about recycling collections, or my religion, to be honest, or my sexual orientation. But I think for people with disabilities, it can be an issue. And I'd ask, and I'm glad I've got you here, Bryn, because you've done some fantastic work on easy read stuff for us with the council, but I think that would be handy if it's decided by cabinet that does go forward. Is that one of the recommendations that I would like to make is that any changes to this are put through in an accessible format for people. So it isn't just, you know, out your usual press releases, usual things from the council. You know, there's a lot of people with learning disabilities, autism, communication problems, that if you have something in an easy read format, would help allay any fears that people would have, and would help them to understand what they need to do regarding getting their waste collected, so that they're not going to worry suddenly, oh, my waste has not been collected this week. That might seem, for most of us, is quite pretty trivial, or that we can just phone up the council and get it sorted. But certainly for people with autism, that can be just a change like that can be very drastic for someone's mental health. So, Bryn, I'm asking you, I've got you here, so I'm going to make use of you. You've done some fantastic work for the council on easy read stuff. So, you know, that's my recommendation, but I'll put it at the end that it's in all communications around this. I'll put in an accessible format, including easy read. But I'll let you carry on. Thank you.
Yeah, well,
did you want to respond to some of those points raised before you went on?
I'll respond to those points raised, and then I think we're kind of more or less there with it, really.
Fantastic.
Yeah, you've all picked up the key points. So, Councillor Burton, I too was very surprised at how balanced the sentiment to this consultation was. You know, through the kind of the reaction to it on social media, but through the consultation itself, you know, I was it was far more balanced than I was anticipating, and we've seen that kind of play out through the response to the recent reporting in the media around it, and yeah, so it shows that people are people see it as being the right thing to do, whilst kind of quite rightly flagging potential concerns that, you know, that's it's our job to mitigate against those things. Councillor Dakara, I think you're right to flag that the point in the kind of any other comments around people saying no, we don't want it to change. We're certainly not hiding it. It's there in the consultation report, which is been available on the website for some time, and it's available publicly through this forum, through cabinet as well. So yeah, it's really not something that we're hiding, but yeah, I guess it's not in the cabinet report kind of headlines itself. So I think that's a fair comment. And in terms of the point about easy reads, easy read stuff's my background and my bag. So that's music to my ears. And we could use the Learning Disability Partnership Board across East Sussex and the Autism Partnership Board across East Sussex and their local Eastbourne networks to share that information, and better to do that proactively than in response to requests. Particularly for that cohort, I think, where we don't want people whose anxiety levels could be raised, not being communicated with. So yeah, I think that's what I said. Jane, is there anything else that you'd like to cover in terms of the mitigations that we're putting in place? I mean, I think one issue that the Equality and Fairness Analysis covered in quite a lot of detail was the issue of kind of nappies and personal waste and kind of storage of that. And it's in those instances that we'd be looking to offer additional refuse bin capacity. That's not something that we're going to offer in all instances, but where there is a need connected to a protected characteristic, we'd certainly offer that. And of course, just to emphasise, assisted collections will continue. Bins will be heavier with 2 weeks' worth of refuse, no matter how much is getting diverted into recycling bins. Those bins will be heavier, and assisted collections will continue, and we'll continue to take new assisted collection registrations to anyone that needs it. We don't have a strict eligibility criteria to that, so we'll continue to promote it in the way that we have done so far. I mean, key to me around this all landing well is the way that we communicate it, because if things change in the middle of April, the most critical thing is to do with everyone knowing which bin to put out on which day. It's and it sounds simple, but it's really quite complicated, and there's just a huge amount of work to be done. So whilst our communications and engagement at the moment is very much focusing on the decision and the rationale behind it, the environmental and financial imperative, the real work begins after a decision gets made to ensure that people actually know what's going to happen, and that's our kind of bread and butter. But work is well underway for that eventuality.
Thank you very much, Bryn. I'm looking if I've got any other hands. My connection went funny for a minute, so no, I don't have any other hands. So what I'm going to do is go back. So the recommendations that we agree that we consider a report. So the only recommendation I had was that we any comms on this we get out in an easy read, accessible format. So that's my proposal. Could I have a seconder for that, please? I can see a hand, Councillor Burton. So all those in favour? I've got a thumbs up. I love the thumbs up, Robert. That's great. Fantastic. Anyone against? What's going on with your hand, Robert? I've got no against. So fantastic. I think that's unanimous. So Bryn and Jane, thank you very much for your time. We were to note the report and note the equality and fairness analysis. We don't. Anyone disagree? No, carried. Right. Okay. Bryn, Jane, thank you very much for your time and taking us through that. Thank you. Take care. Now it is. I'm looking at the time. It's 8:10. I was going to suggest a break, but we are at the end. And I don't know about anyone else, but I'm getting hungry now. not that that should detract from the importance of the meeting. So agenda item 13 is just the forward plan of decisions. That's on page 197 of your pack. And I don't think we do anything with that, do we, Nick? We just note it?
Through you, Chair, Nick, in Democratic Services, it is for noting. We don't have another meeting before the March Cabinet, so if there are items on that Cabinet agenda that members wish to input into, then that would be directly through the input into the Cabinet process, and then obviously we're then looking at the work programme for the next for 21-22.
Fab, thanks, Nick. So if we go on then to that, is there anything on the forward plan of decisions? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Nope. Okay. So on the scrutiny work programme, I'd just like to, you've got it on there, the draft work programme at the back of your pack. We've gone through actually everything now this year. One of the things that I wanted to bring up were two things. So one of them, which I think is pressing, is to have set up a scrutiny panel to look at the impact on housing some of the most vulnerable people in society, actually, by Brighton into the town and the impact that's having. So I suggest setting up a scrutiny panel. I haven't done that before, so I'm thinking it probably, I mean, it needs to be a panel. It doesn't need to be a whole committee. So, you know, the panel can bring things back to the committee. So I'm thinking probably 3 members. Anyone got any, would that be all right, Nick? I see you've got your hand up, Nick. Go on.
Thank you, Chair. Nick Peters, Democratic Services. The Constitution says that panels would normally be 1 member from the main group and 1 from the opposition group. But that says that's normally, we have had more members on panels in the past, so 3 is a reasonable number, but maybe I would suggest 2 from each group, possibly.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Smart, you've got a hand up.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm not sure that a panel is the right thing, actually. It sounds to me like a little bit like when we called in Highways England. I mean, I would have thought the important thing about this Brighton situation, which many of us are involved with, talking about quite regularly, is there's a sense of urgency about this. I don't think it's a matter of a panel going off and actually doing some work. I would have thought the better format would actually be potentially to have an ad hoc or emergency scrutiny committee with, I think, everybody present. I think it's an issue that affects most of us, and I think it would be a scrutiny committee that would have before it. I mean, clearly, Chief Inspector Di Lewis was saying that she would be very happy to be a witness, and I think one would be calling somebody from Brighton and other areas. I just think the format, I think that the speed and probably having all of us involved is better than a lengthy process where a panel goes off and then comes back and reports in 6 months' time or whatever.
Okay, so Councillor Dakara, then Councillor Diplock.
I was going to say exactly what Councillor Smart said, that we need to be calling representatives from Brighton and Hove to come and speak to the scrutiny committee in full, I believe. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dakara. Councillor Diplock.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just I'm echoing what the perhaps more experienced members of the committee have said. A little bit like you, Councillor Freebody. I haven't got a great deal of experience in these kind of things, but it does seem to me that this is quite an urgent matter that perhaps a full meeting is called for. Thank you.
Okay, well, with that in mind, Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I was just going to say, I know not everybody's able to attend the COVID briefings if they're working that happen at 11 o'clock on a Thursday. There is often, it's often mentioned there, and I'm just wondering if officers could just put in a report to Scrutiny updating us on what the situation is already, because I know officers have done a lot of work on this. And I think more does need to happen. I agree with Councillor Takara. So I think it would be good to have an update from officers, but again, reporting back to full scrutiny.
Oh crikey! Everyone's hands are going up and down here. I'm trying to keep track. I've got Councillor Rodahan and Smart. I think the sensible idea. I think Councillor Smart, Takara, and Diplock have made the point around. I think what we need to have is a special meeting of the Scrutiny Committee just on this subject. To do that, I will obviously talk to Nick, but we would look at a date and then invite the relevant people to it. So we need to make sure that people from Brighton, officers are invited to it from Eastbourne, but also others that are impacted, so like the police, etc. So I think there's some work there that we can do on that, and to get that quite, it needs to be quick, as others have said. It's not a matter that we can wait on. But Councillor Rodahan, then Councillor Smart, and then that will be it on that, and then we'll make a decision in a sec.
It was just making certain that we had advice and guidance from the various disciplines, and the only one that you've missed out, I think, is social services. We need all-round guidance on the day from the police, from social services, and their own officers.
Yeah, I think what we can do, Councillor Rodahan, I'll come to Councillor Smart in a second, is that we could get some. We've got terms of reference, if you like, for a scrutiny committee, but we could ping around some people that, some key stakeholders that we'd like to invite to the meeting, because I think, social care, but also our health colleagues as well. So we've got people supporting people with mental health issues, which will come down primarily to one of the local trusts. But Councillor Smart, then Councillor Diplock.
Thank you. I mean, just on your point, Helen, in terms of attending meetings during the day, I mean, this arose from Councillor Holt raising it, and all of us saying on a cross-party basis that we felt this was a dreadfully urgent matter. We're all in agreement. I think that, in terms of the current state of play, if this is helpful, I mean, I think there have been meetings involving both Caroline Ansell and Maria Caulfield. It's being raised at the highest levels at the ministry. I mean, that's just background information if others were not at the meeting. But, as I say, I think the issue is urgency. And actually, at the end of the day, I suspect the timing of it should be almost designated around when you can actually get somebody from Brighton here, rather than putting a date that they are able to back and just say they can't come. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. It's a really good point there. I think we can, most of us are flexible. We certainly are at the moment, because we can't go anywhere within our lives, and we're able to do meetings like this virtually. So I think you're right. I think I'll bring in Councillor Diplock in a second, but I think if we can go back, give us some dates, which would be easier rather than turn around and say, we can't make the dates that you've given us. So if they give us some dates, that would be better. Councillor Diplock.
Thank you, Chair. It probably goes without saying, but I just want it said just to be sure. Whatever happens should be a public meeting, not a private. It should be public and everyone can see it. I see nods all around, so that's good.
Yeah, absolutely. It would be the same as any other scrutiny committee meeting, Councillor Diplock, but we would just have it just on this subject, which would be really good. So I think we're all in agreement there. So Nick, I'm going to defer to you. Sorry, I've given you some work to do, but it is important. So Nick, we'd need to look at setting up an extraordinary meeting of the Scrutiny Committee. I would suggest inviting colleagues or people from Brighton first, so that we can get dates, because that was easier to fit around. Otherwise, we're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, I suspect.
Yes, through you, Chair, and Nick Peters, Democratic Services. It's obviously a multi-organisational issue. There are a number of stakeholders, and as you've identified, representatives from Brighton would be arguably the key stakeholders. So I'll approach those stakeholders, and once I've identified a date or a number of dates that they're available, I'll then expand it, and hopefully we'll get as many people along as we can to discuss the issue. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Nick. So on that recommendation, then I take it we're all agreed. I can see lots of nodding. That's good. And away from Penny as well, which is even better. So there we go. Right. Okay. The other point was Councillor Diplock. You spoke before about scrutiny role regarding environment sort of transport within the town. I'll let you say, because we've already had a bit of a conversation about this earlier, but I'll let you, any work programme there that you want to propose.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's just we've spoken about it before. We mentioned it at previous scrutiny meetings. Just to look at the way the county council interact with the borough council in as far as delivering a transport strategy that works for Eastbourne. There is such a degree of overlap, and there is such a degree of reliance on authorities outside of our direct control, as it were, that it has such a direct impact on Eastbourne. I think it's a really essential thing for 2030, looking at how we can influence and game up our ability to deliver for Eastbourne through the county and through other mechanisms. And we discussed it earlier, and we said it's probably appropriate to look to have something in place after the round of elections due for May. Happy to pass back to you, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Diplock. So I'll go back straight back to you, Councillor Diplock. So would you be? I mean, would you be? This isn't as urgent as the Brighton one, and could be a piece of work. So would you be happy for a panel? And I'm quite happy for two of each party, if you like, to do this work rather than having an extraordinary meeting, and they can then come back, and then if there's to a scrutiny meeting at a later date. Would that be in agreement with you?
Yeah, that sounds appropriate to me, and I think this type of work is better suited to the more traditional task and finish kind of subcommittee thing, where we take our time and get it right and look to do it after the elections. And I think two from each party is absolutely fine.
Fabulous. Right. Okay. So Nick, do I need to? Can we get some volunteers after the meeting, or do we need to get them now?
No, we can arrange it after the meeting, Chair.
Because we're not doing the work now anyway, so.
No, I can liaise with yourself and Councillor Diplock and the wider membership, and then we can organise a task group afterwards.
That'd be great. Yeah, and I say Councillor Diplock and I have already discussed, and as we said, we think that, well, from the last small debate we've had, the Brighton question, if you like, is the most urgent one that's impacting on everyone at the moment. So that needs to go ahead first. And there are elections in May, so we need to be, we don't want to shut down halfway through because of Purda and mess about. So let's get that done after May, but let's get the Brighton question sorted out first. So is everyone in agreement with that? Yep. Any nods of dissent? Sorry, nods or whatever. Shake of the head. That's what I'm looking for. Had to do it myself. I think that's it. Just let me see if there's anything else on my. No. So that being that, can I just thank everyone for their time this evening? Thank you very much to the officers for your time this evening. I can totally understand with you. It's a long day sometimes, where it's 8:30 now, and you've probably been on this Teams or Zoom or Skype or whatever it is for most of the day, as many of us do. So thank you very much. Go and get yourself a glass of something or other and relax, and just say thank you very much, everyone, for your time this evening. And I look forward to seeing you all again soon. Take care. Oh, Nick's got his hand up.
Sorry, Chair, just remind members and officers that there'll be a brief pause while the meeting is taken offline. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Right, that's